Hi, guys, and welcome back from what was likely a crazy week for most of us. I know um, I live right in town in Bangor, and we were without power for 4 days. Um, Pretty crazy. I hope that um, none of your homes or properties sustain too much damage. But I'm glad that we can all come back together and get back on track. So, I'm going to pick up where we left off before the storm. We had just finished chapter 8, so we're going to pick right back up with chapter 9, energy balance and weight management. Body weight and health. So, just as an introduction, we'll go over some statistics and trends. Currently, almost 69% of adults are either overweight or obese. In 1960, the rate for obesity in the United States was about 13.4%, and in 1990, that rate increased to about 23%. Now, today, the rate of obesity in the United States is nearly 35% of the population. A bit of information about definitions. So, when we're talking about overweight and obesity, we are using the scientific definitions, which are based on BMI or body mass index, and we'll talk about that later this chapter. For overweight, that is defined as being too heavy for one's height, usually due to an excess of body fat. And the BMI for an overweight individual is between 25 and 29.9. Now, for obese individuals, the definition for that is having excess body fat, and it's characterized by having a BMI greater than 30. So here's a map of the United States. The different colors correspond with the rates of obesity in each of those states. You'll notice Maine in the yellow, which puts our obesity rate between 25 and 30%. Only 2 states here are showing rates above 35%, and that's West Virginia and Mississippi. When the lowest rates, those states with the in the green, we're looking at Vermont, Massachusetts, Montana, Colorado, Utah, California, and Hawaii. The health consequences of excess body fat. I'll go through these. I think they're probably pretty small on your screen. So, excess body fat can be associated with psychiatric and psychosocial problems such as depression and low self esteem, respiratory problems such as sleep apnea and asthma, fatty liver, gallbladder disease and gallstones, elevated fasting blood glucose and type 2 diabetes, gynecological problems including an abnormal menstrual cycle and infertility, arthritis and gout, gastroesophageal reflux, cardiovascular diseases, and risks including elevated blood triglycerols and LDL cholesterol, low HDL cholesterol, atherosclerosis, hypertension, and stroke, as well as an increased risk for cancers of the breast, colon, uterus, esophagus, pancreas, kidney, thyroid, and gallbladder. I believe that this diagram is also in your text, so feel free to reference that information there as well. What's wrong with having too much body fat? This slide just kind of summarizes the different points that we went over on the last slide. Here they're divided into 2 different categories, chronic diseases and psychological and social problems. So for chronic diseases associated with high body fat composition, we have high blood pressure, heart disease, high blood cholesterol, diabetes, gallbladder disease, arthritis, sleep disorders, respiratory problems, menstrual irregularities, including cysts and fibroids, and cancers of the breast, uterus, prostate, and colon. psychological and social problems, including depression, negative self-image, feelings of inadequacy, and discrimination. Body mass measurements. So we'll be talking about these terms a lot through this chapter, so it's important to go over them now so that we're all on the same page. The first, lean body mass. When we're talking about lean body mass, we're talking about the mass of non-fat body parts. So everything that's not fat, muscle, skin, bones, organs, everything that's not fat is considered lean body mass. Then body weight is the total sum of both your lean body mass and fat or adipose tissue. Body mass index, or BMI, we've already been referencing that. It's currently the standard used for assessing the healthfulness of body weight. And to calculate your BMI, you would take your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Now, since we don't use metric here in the United States, the conversion for that is your weight in pounds divided by your height in inches squared times 703. And there is a table in your text, I have it copied here, that you can look at and go down the left-hand column for your height. And then move across to the right until you find your approximate weight. And then based on that, you'll fall into one of the categories along the top. So this is listed here in feet and inches and body weight in pounds, so you shouldn't have to do any additional conversion. All right, so as you saw across the top, there are 5 different categories of weight status for body mass index. BMI from 17 to 18 is corresponds to underweight status. 19 to 24 would be considered normal weight. 25 to 29 is overweight. 30 to 39 is considered obese, and 40 to 42 is considered extreme obese. Now, BMI, while it is what's currently used as an assessment, it doesn't tell the whole story. So for somebody who's characterized as being underweight, being naturally lean and thin is just fine. However, being thin due to starvation, undernourishment, or eating disorders is not healthy. And for somebody whose BMI classifies them as being overweight, a person may be overweight but exercises weekly and eats healthy. Muscle versus fat, what really matters is body composition. Muscle tissue weighs more than fat or adipose tissue, so somebody with a higher muscle mass could in fact have a higher BMI, putting them in an overweight or maybe even an obese category, when in fact they just have a higher muscle mass. Body composition is defined as the relative proportions of fat and lean tissue that make up the body. Again, excess weight is only part of the story. Excess body fat is what really puts you at risk. So for percent body fat for a young, healthy female, the sort of ideal body fat percentage is about 21 to 32% of your total body weight is fat, is adipose tissue. And for a young, healthy male, the sort of normal range would be 8 to 19% of your total body weight would be body fat. And you'll notice the healthy range for a female is much higher than the healthy range for a male. Now, with age, your lean body mass does decrease and your body fat increases. How do you test body fat percentage? There's a number of different ways. skin fold measurements, underwater weighing, air displacement. Air displacement is done in what's known as a BOD pod, bioelectrical impedance, and dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. All right, so this is showing all 5 different methods. So in the upper left right here, we have the skin fold test. Here we have the BOD pod, the air displacement. The center is the underwater weighing. On the bottom left here is bioelectrical impedance, and then this is the dual energy X-ray method. The skin fold test is what is most common. A doctor or a dietitian might perform this test using calipers that look something like this. It's the easiest way, the easiest measurement, least expensive, and most readily available, but it is also the most likely to have a bit of error to it. It is relatively accurate, but because it is conducted by a person, there's always an amount of human error that could occur. The location of body fat, so where the fat is located in your body, is also very important in determining health risk. Subcutaneous fat is fat that's located just under your skin, and that does not increase health risk. Fat around the thighs and lower body is considered subcutaneous. Visceral fat is the other type of fat, and this is located around the organs in the abdominal area, and this is the more dangerous type of fat, and it does increase your health risk. So when we're talking about visceral versus subcutaneous fat, these 2 types of fat often manifest themselves in 2 different shapes of people. So this gentleman here on the left would be considered more of an apple shape, where the fat in his body is more visceral, more centrally located around his abdominal organs. So with an apple shape and that visceral fat, that would be considered more high risk and more dangerous to his health. On the right here, this woman walking would be considered more of a pear shape. The fat in her body is more subcutaneous, right? In that it's right below the skin surface and is more located in the thighs and legs. The subcutaneous fat in the pear shape is the less dangerous of the 2 types, and is not as likely as the visceral fat to increase health risk. Okay, so when determining apple and pear shape, BMI is often used in conjunction with a waist circumference measurement. Now, this is a good way of determining where that extra weight is being stored. So, for example, if somebody has a high BMI but a low waist circumference, that might suggest that the fat in their body is subcutaneous, so it's not as dangerous, or that they have a high BMI due to a higher muscle mass. Now, if somebody has a high BMI and a higher waist circumference, that's going to suggest a lot of that visceral fat stored around the abdominal organs. Okay, so in men, a BMI of 25 to 34.9 and a waist circumference of greater than 40 inches indicates visceral fat storage. And in women, a BMI of 25 to 34.9 and a waist circumference of over 35 inches indicates visceral fat storage. And a reminder, if this is a measurement that you do on yourself or somebody else, when we're talking about waist measurement, we're talking about the smallest part of your waist, all right? That's where you would be measuring around. So for females, often we have, larger hips, and you want to make sure if you're measuring your own waist circumference that you're actually not measuring down closer to your hips, but that you're actually measuring up further towards the smallest part of your waist. Energy balance. So when it comes to energy balance, again, when we're talking about energy, we're talking about calories. So in order to maintain your current weight, the calories that you consume would have to equal the calories that you burn off. If you were looking to gain weight, you would have to consume more calories than you burn off. And if you wanted to lose weight, you would have to burn off more calories than you consume. A couple more definitions for you guys. Appetite versus hunger. These are different, okay? So it's very important to make sure that you understand the difference here. Appetite is the desire to consume specific foods triggered by external cues, for example, smell. So this is independent of hunger. Hunger is the desire to consume food that's triggered by internal physiological signals. So, hunger is when you haven't eaten in a while, your blood sugar is pretty low, maybe you're getting a little bit of a headache, and you feel hungry. You need something to eat because you haven't eaten in a while. That's hunger. Appetite is, you just had dinner, so you're not hungry, but you need to run to the store real quick. And on your way, you're driving past, a steakhouse, and their smell of their grilled steaks is just kind of, you know, all in the air, and it's coming into your car, and you're thinking, oh my God, those steaks smell so good. I really want a steak right now. You just ate, you're not hungry. And so that smell of that meat is triggering your appetite, right? You're not actually hungry. Your desire to consume that food is triggered by an external cue. Portion distortion. So in this picture, we're comparing a typical meal at a fast food restaurant 50 years ago when these fast food chains kind of first hit the scene compared to today. So soft drinks on average have increased in size 62% over the last 50 years. French fries have increased 57% in size, and cheeseburgers have increased 24% in size over the last 50 years. Energy intake. The energy or calories you eat and drink. Energy comes from the energy yielding nutrients and alcohol. Just a little review, some figures that you should be familiar with. Carbohydrates contain 4 calories per gram. Protein contains 4 calories per gram. Fat contains 9 calories per gram. And alcohol contains 7 calories per gram. Food composition books, nutrition facts panels, and databases can all be used to determine your caloric intake. Energy expenditure is the total amount of energy used by the body. So this includes your normal body functions, your physical activity, and also the energy needed to process food. 60 to 75% of total energy is used on basal metabolism, which is the very, very, very basic bare minimum functions that keep you alive. Your basal metabolic rate, or BMR, is the rate of energy use at rest and fasting. So this would be totally at rest, not eating, again, bare minimum. BMR, or basal metabolic rate, is higher in men than women. It decreases with age and is lower when caloric intake is lower than the body needs. That last bullet that your BMR is lower when caloric intake is lower than the body needs. This is to conserve energy. So your body doesn't want to starve. So if you are, if your body's in a period where you're consuming less food than you should, then your body will actually slow itself down in order to conserve energy and calories. The table in this slide comes right from your text. Different factors that affect basal metabolism. You'll notice things that increase your BMR, higher lean body mass, greater height and weight, pregnancy, lactation, growth, fever, and stimulant drugs such as caffeine and tobacco. Factors that decrease your BMR include low calorie diet, starvation, low thyroid hormone levels. Exercise also increases your BMR. Physical activity. The energy we expend in physical activity includes both planned exercise and daily activities, including things like walking, typing, yard work, etc. Those will be classified as non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. The amount of energy expended depends on the size of the person, how strenuous the activity is, and the length of time the activity is performed. Now, if you have your text with you, you can look up in Appendix H. They give you all kinds of information about how to calculate these values. Now, this table comes right from your text. I know the information looks probably pretty small for you, so you can look it up in your book if you're having trouble seeing it. This is showing 4 different activity levels. So at the very top you have very active, then active, low active, and finally at the bottom sedentary. Now the green and orange bars. The green correspond to moderate intensity activities, and the orange corresponds to vigorous intensity activities. So at the very top, the very active category would be an individual that spends at least 2.5 hours per day in moderate intensity activities, or at least 1.25 hours in vigorous activity. An active adult spends at least 60 minutes per day engaged in moderate intensity activity, or at least 30 minutes in vigorous activity. An adult in the low active category spends at least 30 minutes per day engaged in moderate intensity activity, or at least 15 minutes in vigorous activity. And finally, a sedentary individual engages only in activities of daily living and not in moderate or vigorous activities. The thermic effect of food, or TEF. The thermic effect of food is the energy used to digest food and absorb, metabolize, and store nutrients. TEF is estimated at about 10% of total energy expenditure. So your energy balance, there are 3 graphs here. All the way on the left is the energy needs for a sedentary person. In the center, the energy needs for a physically active person. And on the right, the energy needs for a very active person. And you'll see how as activity increases, so do caloric needs. And you'll see how that breakdown of calories changes as well. So for a sedentary person, most of those calories are going to go toward their basal metabolism. Then as activity increases, you'll notice that green wedge getting larger and larger until in the very active person, activity compromises more than half of the calories that they consume every day. storing, and retrieving energy. So there are two different examples here, and again, this is in your text. On the left, we're looking at a weight gain scenario where the energy in or the food consumed is greater than the energy out. In the example on the left, you have your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fats. When you eat more than you need, the extra carbohydrates, the extra protein, and the extra fat will all turn into adipose tissue. So no matter which macronutrient you're eating a lot of, it will turn into adipose tissue. It'll increase your fat tissue. Now on the right, we're looking at a weight loss scenario where an individual's energy in or food consumed is less than their energy out. So in this scenario, glycogen can be converted to glucose. Your body proteins can be broken down into amino acids, which could be used for energy or for synthesis of glucose. And your adipose tissue can be broken down into fatty acids, which will all work to provide you with energy. Estimated energy requirements, or EER. EER is the number of calories needed for a healthy individual to maintain his or her weight. It's calculated based on gender, age, height, weight, activity level, and life stage. So to calculate it, you would need to know your physical activity value. This is right from your text. Table 9.1. These are the equations for EER. You are not going to have to memorize these equations, so don't worry about memorizing them or calculating them. You can certainly go ahead and calculate it for yourself if you'd like. What is going to be important to know about EER is this information from the previous slide. I expect you to know that the EER calculation is based on gender, age, height, weight, activity level, and life stage. All right, those pieces are important, and you'll likely see them on your final exam. But again, you won't be expected to memorize the equations or do any calculations. Okay. So what determines body size and shape? First, genetics. Obesity genes are the genes involved in regulating body weight. There are more than 100 genes in the body associated with body weight regulation. 20 to 30 of those genes may contribute to obesity. Obesity genes are responsible for the production of proteins that affect how much food we eat, how much energy we expend, and how fat is stored in your body. So more on genes and body shape. Now, obesity is influenced both by your genetics and also by the environment. It's estimated that genetics are 75% responsible for body weight, whereas your environment is responsible for 25% 25% responsible for your body weight. Set point, your body compensates for diet and exercise variations by adjusting energy intake and expenditure to keep weight at a particular level. Okay, your body doesn't like stress. Your body likes to just stay comfortable. So your body will compensate in different ways to keep your weight at a pretty consistent level, right? The body responds to short-term changes in food intake and activity and long-term changes in stored body fat. And this is determined, again, in part by your genetics. Another definition, satiety. You may have heard satiety before. It refers to a feeling of fullness and satisfaction caused by food consumption that eliminates the desire to eat. Hormones and weight control. First, we have ghrelin. Ghrelin is released by the stomach to stimulate the desire to eat at usual meal times. Then we have peptide YY. This is released by the gastrointestinal tract after a meal in proportion to the number of calories consumed to reduce appetite. Excuse me. And third, we have leptin. This is secreted from adipocytes. Now, adipocytes are just fat cells, and it's secreted in proportion to their size to regulate energy intake and expenditure. Why do some people gain weight more easily? Three main factors here. First, there could be defects in specific genes. Second, an individual may have evolved to conserve fat, or they may expend less energy on physical activity. Now, this chart is showing the NEAT difference between obese and lean people. If you remember NEAT, that stands for the energy expenditure associated with basically just keeping your body alive. So person one would eat an amount of food equal to that blue block and maintain their weight. Because that energy in with that amount of food equals their planned exercise, their NEAT, their TEF, which is the thermal effect of food, and their basal metabolic rate, or BMR. Now, person number two may eat that same amount of food, but because their NEAT is lower, they would actually gain weight in that scenario, even though they're consuming the same amount of food as person one. Okay? Managing body weight. Managing body weight to stay in the healthy range. Balance between energy intake and expenditure. You would achieve this balance by making healthy food choices, controlling portion size, and maintaining an active lifestyle. Who would benefit from weight loss? Some things to consider: risk, degree of excess weight, location of excess weight, and presence of other diseases. So this is a little flow chart, again, from your text, helping to maybe help a person decide if they're in a position to lose weight. So is your BMI in the healthy range? Yes. If it is, congratulations. You should probably try to avoid weight gain or weight loss. Is your BMI in the healthy range? No. If you are overweight, you should consider, are there other risk factors like high blood pressure, high blood glucose, increased waist circumference? Do you smoke? Or family history? If your BMI is obese, if it's equal to or greater than 30, weight loss is definitely recommended to reduce your health risks. And again, making weight loss decisions, it's best to involve your doctor or another health practitioner to make sure that you're making the decision that's best for you and also doing so in a way that's healthy. Losing weight. Now, losing weight can come from eating less, exercising more, or a combination of the two. It occurs when you change behaviors that led to weight gain. To lose a pound of fat, you should decrease your intake and or increase your expenditure by about 3,500 calories, okay? This is an important thing to remember. I guarantee that you will see this figure on your final. To lose a pound in a week, your energy balance should be tipped by about 500 calories per day. So that's a great way to remember it, because 500 times 7 is 3,500, okay? This would be considered a healthy rate at which to lose weight. Healthy rate is considered losing a half a pound to 2 pounds a week. And that will help to ensure mostly fat loss and not loss of lean tissue. For most people, a loss of 5% to 15% of body weight will significantly reduce your disease risk. Excuse me. weight cycling, or yo-yo dieting. So this is what an unhealthy cycle of dieting and weight loss would look like. So at the top, we have somebody beginning on a diet regimen. After they begin their diet, they have a decrease in their BMR, reduced energy expenditure, which leads to food cravings, which would likely lead to them returning to their former eating habits, feelings of guilt, frustration, overeating, and new determination to diet, and then the cycle begins all over again. Now, healthy weight loss comes with modification of behavior. It's a lot harder, but it's a lot healthier and more effective. Modifying behavior involves changing food consumption and exercise patterns. It requires identifying behaviors that led to weight gain and replacing them with new ones that promote and maintain weight loss. It's a lifestyle change. This chart comes from your text, the ABCs of behavior modification. Here we look at it with regard to eating and weight loss, but you could use it with any type of behavior modification, whether that's overeating or with smoking or any behavior that you're looking to change. So the first step in behavior modification corresponds to the letter A, stands for antecedent. So an antecedent is kind of a trigger to the behavior that you're looking to change. So in this example, the antecedent might be watching television. Maybe every time you watch television, you sit down with an unhealthy snack. So identifying that antecedent, identifying that trigger, is the first step in making a behavior change. Okay, the B stands for behavior. Recognize the behavior. In this case, it would be snacking on high-calorie foods while watching television. Recognize that behavior and work to modify that behavior. And then the C stands for consequences. So the long-term consequences of overeating can be weight gain. With the modified behavior, eating less or eating a different snack, the new consequence may be an improved self-esteem and successful weight management. Gaining healthy weight. There are people who desire to gain weight and have a difficult time gaining weight. Most of the time, this is genetic and hormone related, and they may not be able to gain weight. These folks should obtain a medical evaluation to make sure there isn't a more serious issue. If they're not getting enough food, they should increase their energy density while maintaining nutrient density. Foods like nuts, nut butters, whole milk, avocados, and healthy oils, and eat more meals, increase portion sizes, and increase number of snacks, and do not skip meals. Also, weight training is a good way for these folks to increase their weight in a healthy manner. Weight loss diets. Effective programs promote weight loss that can be maintained over the long term. They promote healthy weight loss and changes in lifestyle patterns that lead to weight gain. To maintain weight loss, fewer calories need to be consumed. I'm not going to go through all of these examples. This is table 9.2 in your text, and it compares characteristics of a healthy diet with characteristics of a fad diet. Weight loss medications and supplements. There are all kinds of these out there, and I have never heard of one that's a healthy solution to weight loss. That doesn't mean it's not out there, but I would definitely be very skeptical of weight loss medications and supplements. Many reduce appetite by affecting brain neurotransmitters. For example, phentermine, trade name Adipex. Excuse me. They can also decrease fat absorption in the intestine. For example, Orlistat, brand name Xenical, recommended only if health is seriously compromised by body weight. The disadvantage to this medication is that the weight is usually regained when the drug is discontinued. This is again because there is no actual behavior modification. So once the medication is discontinued, the people kind of fall right back into their old habits. This example, again from your text, it's showing an example of the weight loss product Ally. I remember seeing commercials for it. I don't know if it's sold anymore. It might be. But the top example is what would normally happen if you were to consume triglycerides. And then in the bottom example, it shows what would happen if you consume triglycerides and took Ally. So we have lipase, which we know is the enzyme that works to break down triglycerides into fatty acids. Now, Ally blocks lipase from doing its job. It blocks that enzyme completely. So that means that the triglyceride isn't going to be broken down into its individual fatty acid components, and that fat is not going to be absorbed into your intestines. So you might think, oh, hey, that sounds really great. Well, not so much. So when triglycerides aren't absorbed, there's only one place they can go, and that is being excreted in your feces. So not only do you lose the calories that you maybe needed to get from those triglycerides, but you're also going to excrete high levels of fat, which is very, very unpleasant. So typically folks that start using drugs like Ally that block the absorption of fat don't stay on them very long because excreting fat is incredibly unpleasant. Weight loss supplements are not regulated by the FDA. Many of them contain soluble fiber to help you feel full, but hey, so does fruit and vegetables, and fruit and vegetables taste a whole lot better. There are some fat burners like ephedra. Some of you might have heard of ephedra. It used to be on the market for a long time as a fat burner, and it worked to increase blood pressure and heart rate and constrict your blood vessels. It was banned in 2004 after people started dying from heart attacks. You think about it, in order to burn fat, ephedra worked to increase your blood pressure and heart rate. Now, who would probably be taking a fat burner? Probably somebody who's already overweight. If you're overweight, you're already maybe experiencing or at high risk for heart disease and high blood pressure. So taking a fat burner like ephedra and further increasing your blood pressure and heart rate was no doubt going to lead to tremendous problems. Now, it took people dying and ending up in the hospital for this to finally be banned. So my advice to all of you is to stay away from weight loss supplements. You don't want to end up like a guinea pig because these supplements are not regulated. Other weight loss supplements include different herbal remedies, which can be equally as dangerous. Things like bitter orange, guarana, and green tea extract. In small amounts, not that dangerous, but if somebody were taking a lot of any herbal supplement in order to increase weight loss, that's something that you should definitely consult your doctor with. Weight loss through water loss using diuretics or laxative, things like senna, aloe, buckthorn, rhubarb root, cascara, and castor oil. Again, not very effective. It might be effective in the short term, but you're going to be really dehydrated, which is not a good state for your body to be in. And at the end of the day, your body wants to maintain its water concentration. So you're kind of just going to be fighting against yourself and making you feel pretty miserable. Weight loss surgery alters the gastrointestinal tract to reduce food intake and absorption. Excuse me. We're going to talk about a few different kinds here. Adjustable gastric banding. limits the amount of food that can be consumed, and then a gastric bypass reduces the amount of food that can be consumed and absorbed. Then we have liposuction, which is when a large hollow needle is inserted under the skin into a fat deposit to vacuum out the subcutaneous fat. Liposuction is more about appearance than health because, again, it's focusing on the subcutaneous fat, which doesn't increase your risk as much as visceral fat. So different examples here. In this leftmost example, this is the gastric band. You can see it here. It's located at the gastroesophageal sphincter, that valve between your esophagus and your stomach, and it can be loosened or tightened over time to change the size of that opening to regulate the amount of food that is moved through your esophagus into your stomach. Then on this bottom section, this is the gastric bypass. So in this example, you might have heard it referred to as like stomach stapling. This would be your whole stomach, but in a gastric bypass scenario, they would actually sort of partition off part of your stomach. And then reroute your small intestine up to the smaller portion. So essentially, your stomach would be now only a very small portion of what your stomach once was. So in this example, it's not going to take as much food to make you feel full, which in the end should lead to weight loss. Another example here would be part of the stomach being sort of sealed off and then removed so that you're left with a much smaller gastric sleeve, which is still connected normally to your small intestine. Next, we're going to talk about eating disorders, and I think this is the last sort of lesson in this chapter. Abnormal or disordered eating is a psychological illness characterized by specific abnormal eating behaviors, often intended to control weight. We're going to talk about three main types of abnormal or disordered eating. The first, anorexia nervosa, or self-starvation, is characterized by a distorted body image and abnormally low body weight. Bulimia nervosa is consumption of a large amount of food at one time, or binge eating, followed by purging behaviors, self-induced vomiting, exercise, laxatives, etc. And the third type that we're going to talk about is binge eating disorder. This is characterized by recurrent episodes of binge eating in the absence of purging behavior, so just overeating. And this is right from your text table 9.3. You can refer to it if you'd like. It's just giving you different characteristics and comparing each of the three different eating disorders. Different factors can contribute to eating disorders. They may have genetic links, psychological or sociocultural factors, or some combination of two or three of those. You can see here how those circles kind of overlap. It's certainly different for everybody, but likely there's more than one category of factor for a person experiencing an eating disorder. Body ideal and body weight. This is just kind of showing how body weight and body size in women has changed over time, what's considered to be ideal, and how that has an effect on self-esteem issues, body weight issues, and can ultimately affect rates of eating disorders. Anorexia nervosa includes a desire to be thin, which causes decreased food intake and overwhelming fear of gaining weight, even if an individual is already underweight. Excuse me. It's characterized by severe weight loss, amenorrhea, constipation, and restlessness. Behaviors contribute to the maintenance of a body weight that is 15% or more below the normal, and it affects about 1% of US female adolescents. Bulimia nervosa is a powerful urge to overeat with a morbid fear of becoming fat. It's characterized by intense fear of becoming fat, negative body image, and distorted perception of body size. Behaviors include semi-starvation, interrupted by periods of gorging, followed by behaviors to eliminate extra calories and prevent weight gain. Binge eating disorder. Somebody with binge eating disorder engages in recurrent binge eating episodes, but do not regularly engage in purging behaviors. Binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder. There are other eating disorders. Your text has them listed in 9.4. You aren't required to have any of these others memorized, but you can check them out in Table 9.4 if you're interested to read more about them. The only three that you would be required to remember are the three that we just talked about: anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. So there are those other disorders, and we are at the end. So thanks for hanging in there with me. I hope you enjoy the fact that now we're into the chapters that are a lot less chemistry and biology. I will see all of you on Thursday. Thanks.